नमस्कार साथियों, निशंक परिवार हर इतवार की तरह इस बार फिर आपके साथ जुड़ा हुआ है। इस बार हमारे साथ हैं एजाजुल हक, जो कश्मीर यूनिवर्सिटी में कार्यरत हैं। आज के सेशन का हमारा विषय है द आर्ट ऑफ स्टोरी राइटिंग। इसमें अजाज जी की महारत है और मैं इस सेशन में बीच में ज़्यादा देर न रहते हुए संजय जी से प्रार्थना करूंगा कि वो इस सेशन की शुरुआत करें। संजय जी।
ओके, नमस्कार साथियों, आदाब, सत श्री अकाल, गुड मॉर्निंग। I, on behalf of Nishant Society, welcome our today's guest, Janab Ajaz-ul-Haque. Haq Sahib is a versatile personality. He is a producer, columnist, speaker on various social issues, but especially his talks on creative writing are mesmerizing. साथियों, पिछले कुछ सप्ताहों से हम विभिन्न क्षेत्रों से जुड़े हुए उन लोगों से जिन्होंने अपने जीवन में बहुत सारी उपलब्धियां प्राप्त की हैं, उनके साथ बातचीत कर रहे थे और अपने आप को गौरवान्वित महसूस कर रहे थे। इस सप्ताह हमारा सफर कुछ अलग होगा। हक साहब हम एक ऐसी यात्रा पर ले चलेंगे, यहाँ हम कहानी लेखन से जुड़े तमाम पहलुओं पर उनसे चर्चा करेंगे, या यूँ कह लीजिए कि हम उनकी ज़ुबानी द आर्ट ऑफ स्टोरी टेलिंग और राइटिंग के विषय में उनके उद्गार सुनेंगे। एज ए कॉलमनिस्ट, हक हैज़ बीन राइटिंग अ वीकली कॉलम for more than 20 years. Presently, he is working as a producer at Educational Multimedia Research Center, the University of Kashmir. He also teaches creative writing in different higher educational institutions as a visiting faculty. और हमारी चर्चा में creative writing ही रहेगी, and our specific focus shall be on the art of story writing. दरअसल हम किसी ना किसी रूप में सभी लेखक होते हैं। लेखक होने में और लेखक ना होने में अंतर क्या है कि हम कुछ लोग जो अपने विचारों को शब्दों का जामा पहनाकर उन्हें उतार लेते हैं, तो वो लेखक कहलाए जाते हैं। मैं ज़्यादा देर आपके और हक साहब के बीच खड़ा नहीं होना चाहता हूँ। यहाँ मैं सिर्फ फ्रांसिस बेकन का एक कोट लूँगा। आई कोट, रीडिंग मेक्स अ फुल मैन, कॉन्फ्रेंस अ रेडी मैन, एंड राइटिंग एन एग्जैक्ट मैन, unquote. So let's begin this journey, and I'll let you know one thing. You are free to ask your questions. You raise your hands during the session, and we'll take your questions at the end. Moreover, we'll try that no question remains unanswered. Now, the ball is in your court, sir. Please welcome Janab Ajaz-ul-Haque.
Thank you very much for your generous introduction, and thank you for creating this platform through which you invite different people of different kinds of different schools of thought. It's a matter of pleasure for me to interact with all of you. Especially I thank Sanjay ji for proving a bridge between me and the audience sitting at the rest of the places. And I thank Hujuria ji also, with whom I talked yesterday. Sanjay ji himself was quite interested in my talking on the art of storytelling, though we had a session with some of his colleagues a month back almost. Well, I take the cue from the very line that Sanjay ji himself used while introducing me, that actually we're all storytellers. The distinction arises when we make storytelling a technique. By instinct, we're all storytellers. And the very word story is not to be confined to a single definition, because story is the music in the background of our life. That's what I believe as a student of literature and as a student of life per se. When we take birth, we begin the story of our life from there. One is studying, there are two schools to it. One is studying storytelling as a technique and then teaching your students how to sit in the exams and how to follow the instructions in your syllabus of how to tell a story. That is one. Second is that when we understand story as something that is bred and mixed and mingled in our blood, that way we relish the real art of storytelling or story writing. So I was really very happy when you make this distinction that we're all like, we all breathe, like everybody's heart beats, like everybody's body makes different kinds of movements. So this is something that has been given to us as a matter of instinct. Now to make it, to give it a bit of academic touch so that we get to learn something from different masters of storytelling, I, to my humble understanding of the subject and as a student of journalism and literature, have tried to approach this subject from different angles. The first is the political definition of a story. Because if we are to understand the different shades and different hues of story writing, we'll have to approach it through different angles, through different aspects or dimensions possible. What is the political definition? Political definition is when I use my story to subvert your thought, because this is my story. And the relationship between you and me, if it's based on power, means what I say you have to believe, what I say you can't question, then it's my story and you have to follow. That is why this form of storytelling is based on the relationship of power. I am reminded of that wonderful anecdote that an African novelist, Chinua Achebe, all literature students must be aware of the great name that he was. He narrates in one of his novels the story of the anecdote of a father and a child, where a father always tells a story to his child, the story of a hunter and a prey. And story always has a predictable end. The end is that hunter kills the prey. And after a month, he narrates the same story. And the moral of the story is again, the hunter kills the prey. And it goes on and on and on. One day the son stands up and says that, "Father, why is it always that the hunter kills the prey? Has it never happened the reverse, that the prey was saved, or maybe the prey got powerful enough to fight the hunter, or maybe sometimes he escaped, or maybe sometimes he killed the hunter?" The father says, "No, my son, because it's always hunter that writes the story." So whoever writes the story makes the conclusion. That is the political part of the story. It applies to all kinds of relationships that obtain in all territories in the world at present, where the oppressed are being presented as the oppressors and oppressors are being presented as the oppressed. So that's the political angle to the story. The second, as I have classified it, is the journalistic definition. I, as a student of journalism, I've been taught in the classroom that what's the meaning of a story. Simple. Meaning of the story is go report, file a report, get details from different sources and make a story, file a story. When we sit on the desk, we call it a beat. We go on a beat, we talk to different people, we get the details concerning the event that we are reporting, and we make what we call a story. So that's a simple, pure, unadulterated or unschooled definition of a story, where we don't have much to learn because it's all black and white. We don't have a story. We don't have a freedom to interpret facts, because facts are sacred, as they say. Comments are free. So that is our version of the story as students of journalism. The third is medical definition of the story. Medical definition is when a doctor talks to a patient. This is a modern school, narrative medicine. When a doctor talks to a patient narrates his history or her history. That this is what happens, I ate this, and as a fallout of that, I suffered like this. So it's like a case history. Now, the modern school of medicine does not rely so much on history as they rely on story. They say a patient that the patients are told that tell your story. and then the patient narrates their story, not the history. So the story narrates to different kinds of, he makes references, not the technical references of the diseases that somebody is facing. So in that concern, I'm quite fascinated by a few doctors who are medicos by profession. They are surgeons, they are physicians, but their identity as a writer and as a physician has got so much mixed. So it's so difficult to nail them down to their medical degree or to their literary flavor. I wonder whether I should call Paul Kalandi as he was a doctor or he was a writer. He died so young. He suffered cancer, and he got this devastating news when he was only 40 something, and then he had only 1 year, and in that 1 year he had to treat himself, and he decided that he will write a book. Now imagine the agony, the trauma that somebody faces, that he has got only 1 or 2 years to live, and in that 1 or 2 years he has to write down a book and he has to treat himself. Paul Kalanithi, he's no more. And one of the doctors that has really inspired me through his writings is Abraham Varghese, an Indian-born US-based doctor. He makes a difference between history and story. The medical history that we know of the patients. How do we come to know about the series of diseases that somebody has faced? He says that we see tests, we see test reports. I don't have to see a patient, I see his ultrasound. I don't have to see a patient, I see his x-ray. But he says that this is history. Talk to a patient, he'll tell you your story. And that is Abraham Varghese. He makes a difference between history and story in the sense that he says that through history you can cure a patient, but through story you can heal a patient. That is the magic a story makes. And one of very popular names in this genre is Dr. Atul Gawande. Dr. Atul Gawande has written a book about medicine and all that matters. He says that medicine is only a root. Actually, what creates magic is that different kinds of emotions that we get to read from different patients, and those emotions are not seen on your medical reports. Those emotions can only be followed through the trajectory that a story makes between a doctor and a patient. So that's the medical school of this. But since we are all into we all belong to the school of education. One way or the other, we belong to this realm of academics. So what will interest us more is the literary definition of a story. These three, of course, these are three different approaches to it, but what we are more focused on is that we must have the definition that literature gives, that literature makes us understand what does a story mean. It follows a simple theme, the same Aristotelian sequence, the beginning, the middle, and the end. That is the chronology of a story. But the difference between literature and science is that literature does not follow chronology. We can begin with the end, we can come down to the middle, and we can end at the beginning. Because there's no mathematics where 2 and 2 necessarily make 4. There are no binaries where either the thing is right or the thing is wrong. In literature, the thing is right and wrong at the same time. So life itself is a story that we can give the Aristotelian beginning, the middle, and the end. They say that life is all about 3 things: hatch, match, and dispatch. Birth, marriage, and death. These are the 3 big phases of life. And when we understand the art of storytelling through somebody's life, we understand these 3 things. Birth is a miracle, then marriage is a miracle also, and then finally one dies. So death is the predictable end of our life. Now, what's the significance of stories? To my little understanding of storytelling, stories make us understand each other. As Elif Shafak, a very famous Turkish novelist, puts it so wonderfully, she says that stories punch holes in the walls. There's a wall between Sanjay ji and me. We can't understand each other. When we write stories for each other, story punches a hole. We see through these stories. She says that stories are the holes through which we sneak into each other's walls. The walls otherwise are very impregnable. They are impenetrable. We can't see each other. To you, your story is your own. To me, my story is my own. But once we begin to leak into each other, we learn to know each other's story, along with all its nuances, along with all its shades. Sometimes we understand the people are egregiously bad. Sometimes we think that they are outstandingly good. But once we write stories and share it with each other, we come to know that the people who we had thought are so good are not that good. We come to know that the people who we understood was so bad are not that bad. So that is how stories create a very porous border. It's not like line of control which nobody can cross. It's line that everybody can cross because it's porous, it's permeable. There's always an osmosis that occurs between the storyteller and the listener. Osmosis, we were taught as science students, is the process through which these liquids, these plants leak into each other. Certain things seep into each other. So we are all like, our membranes are so thin, are so diaphanous. So whatever I say, that leaks into you, and whatever you see, that leaks into me. So that is the bridge that story creates between people and people. So by that definition, this whole universe is a story. Now we are coming to the story writing part. That was about the story. What is story? Now the thing is that what is story writing? Sanjay ji, I'll tell you, and through you to the audience, that we have people from different subjects listening to this talk. And it really inspires me when my story reaches all the people who have their stories to tell. To my understanding, architecture is a story. Painting is a story. Because finally, what you painting is a mixture of colors. If we see it through a very amorphous angle, it doesn't make any sense. But if we try to extract some sense from the painting, it suddenly turns into a story. The same way, architecture is nothing. Architecture is clubbing together this material of brick and mortar and soil and cement and the rest. But when it makes some sense, it makes a story. So story is something that lends sense to something that appears completely nonsensical. If not nonsensical, that doesn't make any sense. Story is the thread that we weave through it to make a sense out of it. Now, since stories are subjective, so the sense of storytelling also is subjective. In story writing, there are two things. First is the content, and second is the form. One is about what, and the second is about how. The story is about what. That's the story. But story writing is about how. Now, if you ask me what's more important, there are different schools. Maybe somebody says that the story is more important. It's not that important how the story is told. It's more important that what the story is. If we listen to somebody's tragedy, we say that somebody died in an accident. To me, that is important. Not that how did he die. But I belong to the reverse school. I think the second is more important than the first. What makes story important is not the story per se. It's the telling part. It is the writing part. It is the narrative part of it. How that story is told. I have a case, and I defend my case with some arguments that may or may not appear that strong, because the case in literature is different from the case in the court of law. In the court of law, we are there to win our case. In the court of literature, we are here to present our case without any expectations that people have to vote in favor or against. If Sanjay ji or Khujuria ji votes in favor, maybe after a few minutes they'll think that no, this part of it is also true. So there is nothing like siding with or siding against. It is unlike that George Bush verdict that you are either with me or against me. Here you are with it and you are against it. So broadly, there are two genres of story writing: stories that happen practically and stories that are imagined, fiction and non-fiction. Principles are same. Principles that apply, as we discussed in detail in the last session. Those principles I'm not going to repeat here, because just to give you a brief overview or to recap the things that are required in in that form of storytelling, is that we have to abide by certain principles. Those I call commandments. The 10 commandments, what you should follow as storytelling. But here I have given this talk a little different twist, for obvious reason, that I didn't want to repeat the same details that we had discussed once. But in the end, we may have a recap of those things so that we get a better understanding of story writing. So the fiction and the fact, though the principles, the fundamentals of the story are the same. So I have divided this kind of story, whether the story is of the nature that it's a story that we tell in fiction, or is the story we tell in non-fiction. The first part of the story is that is related to the what part, the theme. What is the theme? There are different kinds of stories. Themes are like theme. War is a theme. Peace is a theme. Struggle, bravery, resilience, cowardice, treachery, all kinds of these are themes. But as a reader of a story, the theme will not attract me as much as how that theme has been really narrated, because themes are common. Every single human being can be brave and coward. He fears, he doesn't fear. He's good, he's bad. So there are different themes that are mixed within us. Because ultimately what matters is, as I earlier also repeated, that wonderful quote of Anton Chekhov, Russian novelist. He says that, say the theme is moonlight, but he says that don't tell me the moon shines. Just show me that shine in the glint of a glass, because I'll see myself how the moon shines. So what part is not? Everybody knows that sun is bright. Everybody knows that the night is dark. Everybody knows that the moon shines. But tell me how dark the night is. Give me an illustration. Visually make that story so appealing to me so that I get terrified by the dark of the night. If you say that there was a dark night, there's no one who says that the night was bright. There's no one who says that the sun was dark. These are all cliches. These are all understandable themes. But the point is that we have to based on certain things that are visually appealing. The second part of the second component of the story is plot. Plot is simple. Plot also begins to the how part. The theme belongs to how. The plot belongs to how. What's a plot? If we are to make a student of literature understand simple definition of plot, because we sometimes interchange or sometimes we mix story with a plot. When we say story, we mean plot. When we say plot, we mean story. So what is the difference between that? Simple. If we say the king died and the queen died, that's the story. And then we say the king died, the queen died of grief, that's a plot. Plot gives it a direction. Plot is that trajectory which story follows. But that again forms the what part of the story. Plot, this happened, and after that, and after that, and why. Plot is the link between different amorphous constituents or components of a story. The third is scene. And from here begins the how part that I'm more obsessed or interested with. What's a scene? Scene involves describing a place, describing. The other two are prescriptive. This is descriptive. Scene describes. It describes a place, it describes an event or a feeling, mood of joy, mood of pain, mood of disgust. I have that two lines from Manto to narrate. And just imagine that if someone says that, oh, I was so pained and it is so dreadful, and he uses all such adjectives, but Manto describes a scene. And the description of the scene is that blood curdling. When Manto says that छुरी पेट चाक करके नाफ तक उतर गई, पजामा कट गया, इजहार बंद उतर गया, और मारने वाले के मुंह से कलमा तासुफ निकला, मिस्टेक हो गया. I mean, I don't think that there is anything that you need to narrate the story by saying that it is so dreadful that somebody stabs the other, and then he reaches down to the abdomen and then he rips apart his all innards and bowels, and then he says that I had to kill a Hindu, but I killed a Muslim. Mistake ho gaya. And see the horror of that partition that is flashed across your eyes. Something that has happened 70 years earlier that suddenly flashes across your eyes with all horror, with all dread, that you don't need to use any adjectives, because that is the what part of it. Manto addresses the how part. He doesn't say you what happened. He doesn't tell you what happened. He tells you how it happened. So that is the description of the scene. Or you describe a place. If you describe a place, we say that the place is, there's a place, there's a worshipping place that is nestled in between trees. That is quite a mundane and conventional way of describing. Everything is nestled in something. Then we say that lush green forests and the paradise on earth and other things, that these are now such things grate on your ears, because if you are all keen listeners, that we don't love to listen to everything once or twice or three times over and over and over again. Then how do you describe a scene in a story? Here I have an example by one of the very illustrious teachers of writing, who was called William Zinsser. He died a few years ago, quite old. He was 90 plus. He was called the editor of editors. And he teaches us, when you are writing a story, how do you describe a scene? Don't describe in that conventional way. See, like this. Say, for example, he describes a place and he describes it like this. It's a world. First, he gives the conventional description. This is a place where old meets the new. There's no place where old meets the old. Old always meets the new. So what's so big deal about it? What is so new about it? Then he teaches us, how do you describe a scene in a storytelling? He says that it's a world where inanimate objects spring to life. Storefronts smile, buildings boast, ruins beckon, and the very chimney tops sing their immemorial songs of welcome. Fantastic. Just these two lines give the whole profile of the place that he's trying to describe. Not that place it is a place where you see markets. Markets are everywhere. It's a place where you see colleges and schools and students going to their respective educational institutions. What's so new about it? It is what happens everywhere. But when he focuses on a chimney top, when he focuses on the ruins, this is something that you get to know about the story. That is something really new. Or another William Zinsser model of storytelling, of scene description. This is about Minnesota. See how he describes the place. Otherwise, you go to Minnesota, you describe it, there are skyscrapers and, there's a hustle and bustle in the markets and people just buzzing like bees, and nothing like that. Because this is something that you know. Now he tells you something that you don't know about the place, because he focuses on something really very, very peculiar and very, very matchless and unique. That is the instinct of a good storyteller. He doesn't look towards, he enters an architecture, he doesn't say that that building had a gate. He knows that every building has a gate. He focuses on something really, really very, very queer or very, very weird. That is what William Zinsser does. And he described Minnesota like this. Just listen to these 3 or 4 lines, and we have a great deal to learn from this master descriptionist like William Zinsser. He says, the great flat farms of Minnesota are laid out in a ruled grid, as empty of surprises as a sheet of graph paper. The farms are square, the fields are square, the houses are square, and if you could pluck their roofs off their heads, you would see the families sitting at square tables in the dead center of square rooms. Nature has been stripped, shaved, drilled, punished, and repressed in this right-angled, right-thinking Lutheran country. It makes you ache for the sight of a rebellious curve, or the irregular, dappling color of a field where a careless farmer has allowed corn and soya beans to cohabit. See the imagery. See how many different visuals he puts together. And he describes Minnesota as a place where nature has no place, because it has been overridden, overwhelmed by something that is completely artificial. There's nothing more that needs to be explained. So that is how we describe a scene in a society, in a story. Now the fourth, and that also belongs to the how part, and that is, if you tell me amongst all these things that I have discussed, what fascinates me more, and that is this: the nerve center of all storytelling, dialogues. And dialogues, not just those dialogues that you write down, the dialogues, the spoken dialogues. And see, about dialogues, there's a very wonderful line that I recently read about read of a writer. He says that words are heard, but dialogues are overheard. If you read a story, you are reading the narration. But once there is a scene, there's a conversation between 2 people, they are exchanging dialogues. Dialogues is as if you are listening at their door and eavesdropping. The 2 characters are talking and I'm just lending my secret ear to what they are saying to each other. That's like a dialogue. Dialogue is overheard. Dialogue has that, as Sanjay ji, I was really very happy when you said that when I describe things that it has that, you used a word mesmerizing. I don't know whether I qualify for that word or not, but dialogues have that mesmerizing power. madhosh kar dene wali cheez jo ek storytelling mein hoti hai na, if something that hypnotizes you about storytelling, it's not the theme, it's not the plot. Yes, to a degree it can be the scene, but if something really injects you with a substance that like drugs you, and that is the dialogue. Look, if we say that there's a dialogue going on between 2 people, that he says that, hello, you look tired, or you look happy. He says that, hello, how are you? He says, I am fine, thank you. That's no dialogue. That is space filling. That's a waste of space, because these are the things that we already know that these people will be exchanging. So what is new that somebody says, you look tired? No. I'll tell you just one example of what dialogue making can do to a story. Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay wrote Devdas. All of us know. And then Devdas was picturized once, twice, and the third time. Not going to the backstory of the Devdas, the Bimal Roy Devdas, I come down to the Sanjay Leela Bansali Devdas. Prakash Kapadia wrote dialogues of Devdas. Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay, the real maker of the Devdas, is seen nowhere. See what a dialogue does. Devdas, as all of us know, and most of us must have seen that movie, is the story of that self-destroying lover who punishes himself and just drinks and drinks and drinks till he dies. That's a story, because his unrequited love pushes him to that disaster. That's a story. That's the theme. That's the plot. That's the what part of the story. But what is the how part? How part is the real dialogues uttered through Devdas. Devdas, by profession, because he's the son of a lawyer, Mukherjee, Narayan Mukherjee. His father is a lawyer, and Devdas himself studies law in London. And then, if Sarat Chandra describes his character in his novel that Devdas studies law, and then his personality was such that he would mix emotions with law. This is the what part of the story. That I know that Devdas was somebody that who would not make a difference between what is legal and what is lawful. And when he would talk through a legal language about an emotion that is as vague and as fuzzy as law. Because there's a difference between law and law. Law is vague, law is precise. Law is like smoke. Law is like brick. It can be touched. It is a matter of fact. That's a matter of imagination. That's a matter of emotion. That's a matter of sentiment. So when Devdas talks, forget about the what part of the story. I remember that scene between Chandramukhi, वो तवाइफ जो कोठे पे तवाइफ होती है, when Chandramukhi asks Devdas that why does he drink that much? क्यों देते हो अपने आप को इतनी सजा? Just listen. क्यों देते हो अपने आप को इतनी सजा? And then Devdas says, Sarat Chandra Chattopadhyay, if he had been alive, he would really have withdrawn his own novel and he would have fallen for the dialogues by Prakash Kapadia, what he wrote. When Chandramukhi says, क्यों देते हो अपने आप को ये सजा? And Devdas replies, क्योंकि रोज बैठती है इस दिल में जज्बात की अदालत, रोज होती है मोहब्बत के इस केस की सुनवाई, और रोज यही फैसला सुनाया जाता है कि यू देवदास मुखर्जी, son of Narayan Mukherjee, you are guilty and you drink till death. Forget what part. Devdas is a drunkard, Devdas is a law student, he mixes love with law. Just see the how part. What she's saying. And in how forceful, smashing way he narrates his trauma of a beleaguered lover. And then he translates his emotions through what? Through words. Not through the plot of the story, not through the theme of the story, just through words. Or that one famous line that has been ruling Indian cinema for decades together. Kaun kambakht bardasht karne ko peta hai. And you can give a description of 5 pages that why Devdas was drinking, but just one dialogue describes it better. Just one dialogue. Likewise, there are so many things that can be described better through dialogue, so that a reader comes to know about the real intensity. Earlier, reader comes to know about the fact. That's the first 2 parts. Here, the reader comes to know, like this. We say that it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. Don't touch it. This is the what part of the story. Hey, it can kill you in a minute. This is the how part of the story. Now tell me what is more forceful. Not just telling me that it is so dangerous. Danger is the theme. Killing me in a minute, that's the what part. That's the how part of the story. The 5th, and that again is the how part, because I had classified it. The first 2 belong to the what part, and the latter 3 belong to the how part. The what part we discussed, the how part, these 2 things, scene and dialogue, and the last one in the how part, and that also is really, that is something by which you can, this is the strength of your story. You know what? The 5th and the last, that's called characterization. A character must have a character to stand on. And we are all, matured enough to understand the difference between a character and a character. When I describe someone, I describe his character. How was he? I mentioned somebody, I say that I saw a beggar on the roadside and he was so helpless. And then I was just looking at his face and then I passed by. No, you have not taken me into his character. You have not, here also one of my very principal inspirations as a student of literature is Sartasan Manto, that how he describes his characters. Character. How he described his prostitutes. The character of a prostitute is described in such a way, I'm reminded of a story called Hatak. In Hatak, there's a prostitute. She's so conscious of her ego. Though by profession she does something where she had to kill ego every day, every time in front of her client. But then when a very rich aristocratic man visits her, and then about this prostitute, her name is Sugandhi. Sugandhi is ugly looking. Not to make it as the remark must not be taken as sexist, because this is the matter of fact that Manto relates, that he recounts, that Sugandhi is ugly looking. And then when that aristocrat, that मंटू की जुबान में मोटर वाला सेठ, वो मोटर वाला सेठ जब सुगंधी के पास आता है तो ओह बोलता है. Just see characterization part of it, the dialogue and characterization mixed together. Then Manto says that oh is that snort of disgust and dislike, that he doesn't like Sugandhi. और मंटो अब सुगंधी का एक एहसास बयान करता है. वो एहसास, वो दर्दनाक एहसास जो एक तो उसे वैश्या की होने की हैसियत में ये वो उस एहसास से दो चार होती है, और दो वो एहसास जो उसे बदसूरती का एहसास जो उसके दिल में पैदा होता है. Then Manto says that इस मोटर वाले सेठ की ऊँह सुगंधी के सीने में कभी सुखड़ती तो कभी फैलती थी. The visual description of it, that she's not able to reconcile that this man doesn't like me because I'm ugly. Who the hell is he? What does he think of himself? Then she trades abuse and swears, जो सब गालियां उसके जहन में आती हैं वो बोल देती है उस मोटर वाले सेट के बारे में. So that is the magic that one creates by sketching a character. I recently finished a book that's about, that's not about the storytelling per se. That's about two athletes, and all of us must be knowing, whosoever has a little interest in sport. Basically, I was not attracted by the what part of it, the sport part of it. I was attracted by the how part. His name is Richard Moore. He has written about that Seoul Olympics 100-meter race, when Ben Johnson was tested positive, and then gold medal was snatched from him, and it was given to Carl Lewis. So that is the story. So we don't have to go into that. That happened, that the world knows what happened. But the thing is that he describes two characters. He makes Ben Johnson a character. Ben Johnson is a flesh and blood man, but he makes Ben Johnson a character, and he makes Carl Lewis a character. See the names. He puts Big Ben as Ben Johnson and King Carl as Carl Lewis. See how characterization is done. And when he compares the two characters, actually the two men, he says Johnson is rough, Lewis is smooth. Johnson exudes menace, he's a boxer or he's a bull. Lewis is a butterfly, sleek, graceful, soft-featured. This is how he compares two characters. So that is the real thing that a character does. Or I'll have just a couple of lines that I'll tell you about a man who many have described, and then someone else has described it like this, because he's a man who would talk very slow. And then if we say that he talked very, very slow, okay, there are many slow talkers. If we say that there was much gap between his word and word, okay, there are many people that they take a huge pause between a word. But tell me how. Say like this. He was a gifted, he spoke with calm and poise. His words were like beads in a rosary, discreet, distinct, and detachable. He was a gifted motivator who could make even a committed hedonist commit suicide for a cause. He chose words like goldsmith chooses spangles for ornaments, with tweezers as thin as invisible. So this is the visual description of a man who talks very, very slow. So that is the fifth and the characterization part of it. How much time left, Sanjay ji?
Yes, sir. Time is not a constraint that way. Okay, but I would like to hear from you those 10 commandments in a very QA, right? One thing, and there is a question from Deepika Malhotra.
Oh, sure. I'd like to.
Okay, I'll just add to that.
Okay.
She says, can you please give a very simple steps which teachers can use to encourage young story writers?
Right.
And my request is, you please be with those 10 commandments. I would like to, because the audience is different.
Oh,
This audience is a bit deep.
I'm so happy. I'm no Jesus to have 10 commandments, but the thing is that you like those 10 commandments. It makes me very happy. I'll tell you. Then finally it comes to the craft of story writing. How do you? I was telling you, because it's not possible to finish up the whole thing in a session. Actually, we always try to draw an outline of the subject that you ought to introduce first as a subject. You cannot just jump over to the craft of story writing, that this is the toolbox and do this, don't do that, and it's a work manual. So it all starts with getting a sense of the subject that we are trying to approach, actually, because storytelling is such a huge subject that we study it not as a matter of we just want to finish it as a paper. Story writing is an institution. There are different kinds of branches and ramifications of story writing. But the thing is that when you have to talk about a theme like storytelling or story writing in a session, you try to draw some contours within which we can think about doing that. Otherwise, it's a lifelong commitment. Mapasa wrote stories the world all his life. Tolstoy wrote stories all his life. Mir Taki Mir used to say, "Gayi umr dar band fikre ghazal, to is fan ko aisa bada kar chale." I have dedicated my whole life to this one small thing that you call ghazal. I have done nothing in my life. So the thing is that the story writing is, like all great arts of the world, the art that demands a lifetime commitment. But there are a few things that I have tried to capture in just 10 principles that we earlier discussed, and I'll just like to take you through to those 10 commandments as a response to the question that you just asked. My first commandment was, thou shalt not bore. So if we understand the meaning of boredom, I tell you something, I make a long beginning of the story. By the time my listener gets activated to listen to my story, he is deactivated as a false sim, so he falls asleep. So there's no question that you bore your listener. Second is that don't repeat, because repetition is a hell on the story. Repetition is like a fungus that grows on you. It's like a weed that if you have used a dialogue once, don't repeat. If you have used a joke once, don't repeat. Joke once is a joke, twice it's a tragedy. First, people laugh at the joke. Second time, they laugh at you. So joke is a very, very fragile thing. It's to be handled with care, like that glass case where it's always written this side up and handle with care. So handle with care handle your jokes with care so that your jokes do not bomb. So that's the second. The third was that do not try to impress. Don't try to philosophize in your storytelling techniques. You're trying to say something, but you're trying to intellectualize in such a way that the other takes time to understand as to what you're saying. If you're trying to narrate a scene in the brutest possible manner, use the same language as the same scene demands. If your character is somebody who loves to abuse, use that abuse. That is the core description of the story. So don't try to impress. Actually, impressing is that you have to have that body language. That's okay, but don't try to slip into those smooth territories, intellectual, academic territories for no fun of that. And the fourth one, that don't be dry. Use humor as a weapon, because humor is a secret weapon. You have to massage your listeners with this secret weapon. And humor is not something that you make a stage out of that okay, now humor. No, that's nothing like that. Humor is like breath to your voice. You don't decide to breathe. If I say that, oh, I have got a lot of work to do at home, what? I want to breathe. Breathing is no work. Breathing is like circulation. If I stop breathing, I die. So humor is used as an invisible, as a technique that is only felt. So that is what makes humor natural and not artificial. Natural humor is like breathing through lungs, and artificial humor is like breathing through ventilator. And in this COVID-ridden world, we understand the difference between breathing through ventilator and breathing through our natural lungs. And then the fifth was, that's a very important thing that is to be borne in mind by all students who want to write stories, that you should not be verbose. Don't use two words where one will do. Don't use a sentence where just you can omit it. Don't don't try to waste your words on your listener. I understand the significance of words by saying that words are like bullets, don't waste them. And anyone who has seen an action scene in a film, you see that the intelligent cop never wastes his bullets on the villain. He uses his bullets one by one and focuses his bore on a target, where if he shoots a bullet, the bullet hits the target. So the thing is that words have to be like that. We have to use the words that occupy less space, but they cover more meaning. That is the technique that is learned, but I'm just trying to give you the gist, the outline of it. The sixth was, don't mystify, don't make it more complicated, because ultimately you have to say your thing. No, you don't have to mystify your thing. The principle is KISS, keep it simple, stupid, and as simple. And when I say simple, I never mean graceless. When I say simple, I mean elegant. When I say simple, I don't mean dull. I mean really graceful. I mean really something that by its very simplicity sounds so beautiful. Because the prophet of this simplicity was George Orwell. He talks about the totalitarian system, he talks about that political philosophies, but in such a simple language that any student, whether he or she is not from political science or not from social sciences or not, but still understands that, lucidly understands that relationship of power between people and people. That is the magic we can create by using a really simple language. And again, that William Zinsser comes to my mind. He says that don't dialogue where you can simply talk. He says that dialogue is a high flown word for something which can be easily described through a talk. Or when he says that if you're on a dentist's chair and a dentist says that, are you experiencing pain? That's a complicated expression. When he says, does it hurt? That's a simple expression. So simpler expressions are very direct, very straight. These principles, each principle is to be described as like a chapter. Each principle will qualify as a book, but just getting you through them. The seventh is, don't use cliches. If you're a good story writer, you know that there are certain words that are being commonly used. Like we go from pillar to post, like something has become a bone of contention, like something has become an apple of discord. No. Cliches are like germs. Cliches are like worms on your story. You have to really work hard and coin your own metaphors. Just think, it will take you a week to find a comparison. You compare beauty of some with the beauty of the other. You compare the ugliness of some face with the ugliness of the other. But that takes a lot of thinking. That is what makes your storytelling fresh. Otherwise, if you will borrow phrases that are already used, that will make it easier, that will make it faster, but that will make it very, very superfluous or superficial, to say the least. That will not attract your reader. But once you really think that, how do I describe this? I'll have to have a metaphor of my own. I'll say that my tongue is getting dry as dust. That's already used. Everybody uses. Try to find a metaphor for your dust. You think. When a coconut is desiccated, that is the driest form of some substance. If you say that my tongue became as dry as a desiccated coconut, just see the feeling. Just see the feeling. एक सूखे नारियल की तरह मेरी जुबान मेरे मुंह के अंदर थी. Sukha nariyal. There can't be anything drier than that. And this is a phrase that belongs to you. You can have a copyright on that. And the eighth one was, be direct. Just be direct. Round, as I keep repeating that Arshad Varsi line, round, mat ghoom, center ki baat po. Just be direct. As in Quran, there's a line, Kulu Qawlan Sadida, that just nail it on the mast. What you want to say it straight. No, if you are angry about somebody, just go to hell. If you feel a passion about someone, just I love you. If you simply hate him, I hate you. This is the simplest and the most direct, the most straight expression that your story reader will like of you, rather than telling him 10-page description and still he's not able to make out whether you really love him or whether you hate him. Don't confuse your reader by being indirect. Just annoy him, provoke him, but be direct. But don't confuse him and be indirect. So these were the 9th and the 10th was, 9th is a bit debatable, thou shalt not lie, but actually all fiction is based on lies. Fiction is the lie that tells you about the truth of life. And the last one was, thou shalt speak through silence. So we have to use silence also as a technique. It's not always words. It's just not always that you go talking, or writing. Sometimes you have to just make a pause and let your body communicate, let your silence communicate. So these were those 10 principles. Ab Sanjay ji ke कहने पर just getting you through.
Thank you, Ajaz sir. You may continue. There is a question from Tanveer Habib from Srinagar. Does first-person narrator, who is the part of the story, helps us see the things better than a third-person narrator?
Oh, that's a good question. Tanveer, first person is very, very intimate, but there's always a risk when you handle the subject in that first person narrative. It's more subjective. That's why memoir writing is considered as the most intimate way of storytelling. You're telling a story about yourself, but of course this is your story, so it has to be subjective. The third person story is more distanced. When I say that he said to him, I am more comfortable with the first person part of it, because that glues me to my reader. That makes the contact between me and my reader as intimate as it can naturally be. But the only thing is that how biased or how subjective or how prejudiced we can be, that varies from case to case. I can try to reduce the element of bias in me as a first person narrator, but I will not be able to eliminate it completely. So that part, my viewer or my listener or my reader has to judge that how much I have been subjective. But to finally answer his question, I'm more comfortable with the first part because it's more heart to heart. It is more soul to soul. I get transported into the mind of a reader when I describe my own story in the first person narrative.
Thank you, sir. There is another question from Rita from Madhya Pradesh.
Okay.
And she asked, can you please define the events in a story once again? And how can we teach these events in a class?
Oh yeah. Describing an event, I told you that language is the key. Story is a lock, event is a lock. Word is the key that unlocks that lock for you. You have witnessed an event or you have experienced an event. And then in a classroom, you're trying to describe that event. Now, how do you do that? Use language as key. Not that you have to, spice it up to a degree so that you mix lie with the truth. No, that will have a very bad effect on the very veracity of the event. We don't have to make stories up. We have to make stories up if we write fiction, but first we have to make it very clear as to I'm talking about a story that has really happened to me or a story that I'm imagining. There was a huge scandal in the name of a book that was written by James Fry. That book was called A Million Little Pieces. He wrote it as a first person narrative, as a piece of non-fiction. that he was in a plane, then he developed a pain, and then he was operated upon without giving anesthesia. That was so compelling a story, but finally that turned out to be based on falsehood. So that man was sold. Ultimately, we have to define. If I am telling a story that's based on pure fiction, okay, I can let my imagination run as wild as it can. But if I am describing a scene that I have experienced, then the first thing that I have to keep in mind is that I have to be very honest. But being honest never means being literal. As students of literature, we have to understand the meaning of honesty. I'll use a line from Irfan Khan that he uses in a film. I'm so attracted by this line, and I use that line when I am to make my students understand the basic difference between what is attractive but not truth and what is truth but not attractive. He says the story is like this. Just listen and take it home. There's a wonderful line, and that will tell you the significance of the scene and the significance of the dialogue as well. He says, बाज चूजे पर झपटा, कहानी सच्ची है पर अच्छी नहीं लगती। चूजे ने बाज पर पलटकर वार किया, कहानी सच्ची नहीं पर खुदा कसम बहुत अच्छी लगती है। So what is really true but it's too literal, what is completely untrue but it is so fascinating. So a good storyteller makes a very, very fine balance between what has really happened and how fascinatingly how attractively, how beautifully he is going to present it in front of it. Because ultimately serving a reader is like serving a guest. When you're serving a guest, you bring him salad in a salad bowl that is the best salad bowl in your house. You make a picture of those slices of cucumber and carrot and radish and present it in front of him. Just put those slices of carrot one upon the other. It will become a junk heap. The thing is that a storyteller places the ingredients of a story, of a real story, in such a manner that will really attract their listeners. So that depends on the craft and on the skill, and that is learned, as I say, that demands a very lifetime commitment, and gradually we are all trying to learn and we are all trying to practice.
Well, friends, if you have some more questions, I'll be happy to take that. But I have a query, Ajaz sir, कि अभी आप बात कर रहे थे देवदास की या किसी और कहानी को जो हम नाटक में तब्दील करते हैं या फिर उसको फिल्म में तब्दील करते हैं। जब वो राइटर लिखता है उसके जहन में कभी ऐसा नहीं होता कि वो एक कहानी जो किसी नाटक में तब्दील होगा या नहीं होगा। अब कितनी लिबर्टी ले सकता है प्ले राइट या स्क्रिप्ट राइटर उस स्टोरी के साथ खिलवाड़ करते हुए, और जो आत्मा जो सोल उस स्टोरी राइटर का था, क्या वो कहीं ना कहीं हर्ट नहीं होता होगा क्या?
हाँ, संजय जी, अच्छा सवाल किया आपने। ये हमेशा एक कश्मकश होती है दो फनकारों के बीच। इट्स ऑलवेज अ टसल बिटवीन टू क्रिएटिव आर्टिस्ट्स। वन क्रिएटिव आर्टिस्ट writes his or her own way. Say Sarat Chandra wrote a novel. He never knew that this will be picturized one day. He never knew that new dialogues will be infused into it. But once you, as a screenplay writer, convert a plain story into scenes and then those scenes into dialogues, then you yourself are a creative artist. It is, of course, the baseline is his. The foundation is his, but you are the creator. Look, in the last lecture also I gave you the example of 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude was originally written in Spanish by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and then he was translated. The creator was translated, means his novel was translated into different kinds of languages, including English. Gregory Rabassa translated into English as 100 Years of Solitude. Now, those who are well versed in Spanish, they say that many Spanish nuances have not been communicated as lucidly as the author meant. But those who are more familiar with English, They say Gregory Rabassa has done a greater role as a translator, the role that even the original creator, Marcos, could not do. This again is a subjective view. You are creating your own subjective art by translating somebody's work or by converting somebody's stories into dialogues. Story is mine, dialogues are yours, because these are two separate ownerships. Now, you can't make a dialogue that the story will not own, but ultimately you will have to be given that freedom, because you have to convert those feelings into the spoken words. So this is always something that will be, this case is always decided sometimes in the favor of the creator or sometimes in the favor of the translator, and the battle goes on and on and on.
So, if there are other questions, one more query, Ajaz, sir, and that is, whenever a story writer writes a story,
Okay.
there is basically a question from Suhail. So, how we decide the structure of a story, whether it should be chronological, or he wrote something which I couldn't understand, and that was something race death. But the basic question is, how do we decide the structure of a story, whether it should be chronological?
Sanjay ji, uh, structure of the story, there are two ways. One, that first you lay down the structure and then you try to stuff it. Second is you just go on. In most of the cases, what happens with a story writer is that he doesn't have a structure in his mind. He has a beginning in the mind, he has a rough outline in his mind. Actually, I'm not quite comfortable with the word structure as much as I am comfortable with the word outline. Structure is like a blueprint. Like you make an architecture, you make a blueprint. Once you're making a blueprint, you start with something, you end up somewhere else. You had one structure in your mind, but by the time you end your story, it ends in an entirely a different, or if not entirely a different structure, but it is not the way as you had planned it, scripted. Because story writing is not a destination, story writing is a journey. You start from a point and you think that I'm going to write this way and that way and that way. The first king will die, then the queen will die, and then this will happen. एक था राजा, एक थी रानी, दोनों मर गए, खत्म कहानी. Then you'll say, no, दोनों मर गए, लेकिन कहानी तो खत्म नहीं हुई. I just want to make a sequel of it. So your structure is open-ended. There are many novelists who first write the end of the novel and then work down to the beginning. That's also an art of story writing, because it doesn't follow one set, hard, cast iron mold of story writing. So about the question of the structure, I will be more comfortable in writing a story just thinking about a brief outline, making a synopsis of the story, just making a synopsis of the story, and then I work on it. As I keep working on it, structure evolves. Structures are not laid down, structures evolve. So you're a good storyteller if you first do the basic part of it and then work more on the craft. That is why I always focus and I always concentrate and I lay more focus, more emphasis on that how part of it, because that will ultimately determine the structure, that what your story is going to be about.
Yes, sir. Due to paucity of time, I'm taking one more question, and then I will come to you again. The question is from Mudassar Gul. Can we say fictionalized truth is more effective in a story writing? What are fictionalized truth?
Fictional.
Yeah.
Mudassar Gul, good to have you here. Fictionalized truth is an oxymoron. It's a contradiction unto itself. We say fiction, then we say truth. It is truth, but fictionalized, or it's a fiction, but rendered in the form of a truth. You're the master of your story. Story writer is a god. Gods can't be challenged. I can't challenge God. Why have you made me like this? I should have been better looking. God has made me like this, so I accept it like this. When you decide what is the matrix of your story, the matrix of my story is that I write creative non-fiction. I write about the events that have happened. So fundamentally, it's true. But now I try to create a fiction out of it. The story is true, but I'm trying to create a fiction out of it. Now, what will determine the success of my fiction? That is the technique, the language, the 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 flavor that I adopt while narrating that truth. In journalism, facts are narrated as facts. Somebody died, somebody arrested, somebody nabbed, this happened, that happened. That's a chronological narrative of the things that have happened. You have no freedom, no room to embellish those facts. You can't interpret them your own way. Once you write your opinion, that gives you liberty, that gives you freedom to interpret the facts, the proof that you have witnessed. So finally, fictionalized truth, or the truth that has been rendered into the form of the fiction, these two things, there is a porous border in between these two. These two things will always try to leak into each other, and a reader sometimes really wonders as to what part of the story is believable and what part is not. So, to add the credibility and the believability to your story, you first have to define the very genre of your storytelling. If it's non-fiction, I get to know in the very first instance that you are writing about something that has really happened on the ground, because I also know the event that has happened. But you are writing in a fictionalized form. There you have the compulsions, or you have the dictates of the language, or you have to, some sweet, allegoric or metaphoric instructions of the language that you have to follow to make it more readable. Otherwise, if we give it as chronology, I'll just give you one example. Homage to Catalonia was written by George Orwell as journalism. That's a pure journalistic book. What happened at Catalonia? Then he rendered what happened at Catalonia into a novel that's called Animal Farm. That's a pure fiction. He made characters of humans. One human being is given the character of a pig, somebody sheep, somebody is a donkey. So there are different kinds of animals, but those animals represent those humans who are actually in flesh and blood. So that is how you negotiate two different themes, two different genres of literature.
Thank you, Ajaz sir. But before we say goodbye to our viewers, will you please, in very, very simple steps, for those young children, for those young writers, how to encourage them towards this genre? What steps would you say for those to encourage young story writers?
Sanjay, when we drive a car, what do we need first? Without that, the car will not move. And
Now you have to have a your engine key.
no, that comes from outside. Even if you have an engine, the car is in the perfect condition. Perfect condition. You've got it brand new from the showroom, but it needs something to keep moving.
There should be petrol in it.
Hang on. Fuel. Writing is like a vehicle. Reading is like a fuel. Unless we read, we can't imagine. Maybe I may be more biased towards reading. My this statement can be challenged in any court of law. I'm ready to fight my case. Without reading, thinking of any writing will be like imagining driving something without a fuel. Now, don't try me. We can have petrolless cars. We can have petrolless cars, but they are not fuel-less. Fuel takes a different form. They are electrically driven. Their electricity acts like a fuel. So finally, the first thing that I'll tell my young students is to develop a hunger for reading. Once you read, you test yourself. Once you read, you fertilize the nascent eggs in your mind, because ultimately it's all about mating. No human beings can be created unless two human beings mate. Ideas mate, they create new ideas. So the point is that we have to interact with different kinds of ideas. So what are the repositories of those ideas? It's books. The first thing is read as much as you can absorb. And the second is that develop a passion for language. Because I am all about developing the craft of story. Whether you are a novelist or a short story writer or a journalist, you write creative nonfiction, whatever you write, there are certain principles that hold good everywhere. Like whichever religion you're from, there's no religion that allows theft. There's no religion that allows burglary, that allows adultery and other things. Certain things are sinful in all religions, and certain things are encouraged in all religions. So the thing is that certain principles are encouraged in all genres, are not just encouraged, they're a must. You can't construct, you can't build an edifice without those things making as your fundamentals, as your pillars. So that thing is language. Have a fascination for language. Don't just like it, love it. And don't just love it, lust for it. You have to have a lust for language. Know new words, know the shades of the words. Know the just don't know the meaning of the words. You know what is the hallmark of a good storyteller? An ordinary person knows the meaning of the words. A storyteller knows the meanings of a word. Meanings. इसको बोलते हैं लफ्ज में झांकना. एक को लफ्ज को देखना, दूसरा होता है आपके पीछे जो पर्दा लगा हुआ है ना संजय जी, ये पर्दा है, मुझे पता नहीं है उस पर्दे के पीछे क्या है. So if I am not interested, okay, I don't know what lies behind the curtain. That curtain I take as a word. But if I'm a storyteller, I'll unfurl that curtain. मैं उस पर्दे के पीछे झांकना चाहता हूं. I just want to peep through words, not through words, between the space that is created in between words. You know, in storytelling, just it's not the word that has the meaning only. It is the space between the words, that it is the punctuation mark that carries meaning. It is the silence between words that carries meaning. So that is why I say that finally there is only one thing that cannot be taught, that has to be your own. That is curiosity to learn. Just guarantee me that one thing, and the rest, the world is yours. You teach me story writing. I'll sit at your feet and learn the art of story writing. The only thing that you got to have of your own is your curiosity, your hunger, your thirst for learning. And once we are thirsty, we will search for water. You know, we'll beg for water, we'll borrow, we'll steal, we'll rob into, storm into others' home, because I'll die of hunger, I'll die of thirst, I need food. Now the thing is that if I'm hungry, what kind of food? Kind of food that you decide. I am no one to decide the kind of food that you love for yourself. I am here to tell you, you need food. We need food. We are all hungry. So all storytellers, the first thing, read what pleases you, read what fascinates you. I'm not give you the stuff that you should read, the stuff that you will have to choose for yourself. And second, develop fascination for language. The third, that no words, no meaning for the words. Grapple with, and then grapple with ideas. Ideas float in air. Ideas, you know, I won't say that idea is something that comes by magic. Idea comes by contemplation. You just sit in your chair for just an hour, ideas will take you. Ideas sometimes receive you rather than you receive your ideas. But the only thing is that sit yourself down, think, read, write, and enjoy your life.
अजाज सर, मैं पूरे निशंक परिवार की तरफ से आपका तहे दिल से शुक्रिया करता हूं कि आज हमने एक ऐसी डिस्कशन सुनी है आपसे. अब मैं रिंदर भाई से अनुरोध करता हूं कि प्लीज वो आए और इस सेशन को कंक्लूड करें. रिंदर जी.
थैंक यू आप सब, बहुत ही अच्छा सेशन रहा और फीडबैक आपको करूंगा बाद में. और मैं उम्मीद करूंगा कि आगे भी हम इस तरह से सेशन करते रहेंगे ताकि लोगों को ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा फायदा मिल पाए. थैंक यू आप सब, एंड थैंक यू संजय.
So nice of you. Thank you all. Convey my thanks to your audience as well. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed this session with you. Nice of you.
Thank you, sir.